Hello, I am Henry Keane and we are UATV. We are online giving you the Ukrainian perspective of reality of war. Watch in the episode. Rain hell on them. US Senator threatens Russia's allies. Ukraine is ready to continue negotiations. How North Korea utilizes friendship with Russia. Please comment and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you are joining the fight against criminal Russian aggression. Welcome to the News Pulse. Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, has suggested holding a meeting this week to the Russian side. This was stated by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He noted that everything should be done to achieve a ceasefire. The Ukrainian leader also emphasized that he was ready for a meeting with Putin.
The Russian side needs to stop hiding from solutions, the exchange of prisoners, the return of children, an end to the killing. And there needs to be a meeting at the leaders' level to really ensure peace, a really lasting peace. Ukraine is ready for such a meeting. And one more thing, we must all remember that the independence of our state is based on the resilience and patriotism of our people, our Ukrainian heroes, heroes of different times, who equally defend and are defending Ukraine.
And just after that, Ukraine's intention to continue the negotiations. Russia unleashed a barrage of drones and missiles against Kyiv. Russia's new tactics use hundreds of drones and a little more than a dozen missiles in a strike. Residents hid in the subway while drones hit several residential buildings and a ground part of the metro station. That's the reality of Ukraine right now. By the way, Russian drones landed into a civilian residential complex just around the corner with the embassy of Azerbaijan. I remind you, Azerbaijan and Russia openly confront each other now, and President Aliyev openly wished Ukraine to push back and take its occupied territories from Russia. Ukraine urgently needs additional air defense systems to protect it from Russian strikes on its rear. This was reported by the head of the Situation Center for Ukraine at the German Defense Ministry, Christian Freuding. Russia is actively expanding its production capacity to massively use drones against Ukraine. According to him, the simultaneous use of up to 2,000 drones could become a serious test for the Ukrainian air defense system.
Russia is increasingly attacking Ukraine, Kyiv in particular, using drones and missiles. Last year we saw drones, usually about 100, used in conjunction with cruise ballistic and in some cases hypersonic missiles. Now the situation is different. Russia is planning airstrikes 3 to 4 to 5 days apart, using as many as 700 to 800 UAVs, along with dozens of cruise missiles, concentrating on a single target. Let's take the example of the Shahed drone. It costs somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 euros. It is absurd to fight it with Patriot-guided missiles, which cost over 5 million. In fact, we need countermeasures that cost a couple thousand euros.
But Ukraine seems to have won the favor of the new US administration. Prominent Senator Lindsey Graham promises to rain hell on Russia and the countries that support Putin by buying cheap Russian oil: Brazil, India, and China. We shall see if such threatening rhetoric has some ground after the time of 50 days runs out for Russia, but we remember that Iran did not have to wait for the US resolve after their ultimatum time was over.
But here's what I would tell China, India, and Brazil. If you keep buying cheap Russian oil to allow this war to continue, we're going to tariff the hell out of you, and we're going to crush your economy, because what you're doing is blood money. You're buying cheap Russian oil at the expense of the world, and President Trump is tired of this game. If I were President Putin.
New contracts will be signed this week on drones for the front line and for the defense of Ukrainian cities. This was announced by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy after a report by the AFU Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Usyk. Ukrainian defenders continue to destroy Russian sabotage groups in Pokrovsk and other directions, said the head of state. At the same time, the AFU Commander-in-Chief reported on Ukrainian long-range strikes, in particular about the frequency and effectiveness of diplomatic strikes. Russian logistics should suffer tangibly in response to the prolongation of the war, emphasized Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The provision of Ukrainian fighters with weapons and interceptor drones was discussed at a meeting between Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal and his deputies in charge of international cooperation and support, as well as the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov.
First and foremost, the provision of necessary equipment and weapons to the soldiers, also issues of defense of Ukrainian cities. We will scale production in Ukraine and purchase interceptor drones. They have already proved themselves from partners. We expect tangible results in the near future. We will intensify our work in every direction to strengthen our defense potential. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Telegram.
The USA and Ukraine intend to sign an agreement on the production of drones. This was announced by Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko. She noted that Kyiv and Washington were negotiating US investments in the production of UAVs.
We are planning to sign a drone agreement with the United States. We are discussing investments in expanding the production of Ukrainian drones in the United States. That is, we are talking about purchasing a large batch of Ukrainian drones. The political decision on the agreement was made by Presidents Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump. Officials are already discussing the details. Yulia Sviridenko, Prime Minister of Ukraine,
Australia has handed over the first part of a batch of 49 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. According to Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal, the Ukrainian armed forces have already received the armored vehicles. The rest of the tanks will be delivered in the coming months. I would like to point out that Australia is one of Ukraine's largest partner countries outside NATO, which has been providing support since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion.
This significant boost was part of a $245 million aid package, which is part of the total $1.5 billion in support Australia has provided since the start of Russia's all-out war. We thank the Australian government for its strong support and determination to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine in these challenging times. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Putin lied to Donald Trump about his intention to end the war against Ukraine, and the American leader realized this, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said in an interview with the New York Post. He clarified that he understands Trump's feelings, since Trump truly believed that the Russians were capable of ending the war, but in reality they had no such desire.
President Trump is disappointed that it all turned out to be a lie, that Putin was just playing with him. Putin wasted President Trump's time. I would very much like the United States, Congress and the President to put pressure on the situation with sanctions. And the sooner this is done, the better. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, in an interview with the New York Post.
Putin's refusal to stop the war against Ukraine is costing Russia its regional influence and energy markets. The Washington Post writes about this. The publication reminds that since Putin refuses US President Donald Trump's peace proposals and civilians are being killed during the constant Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities, hopes for an agreement on ending the war or restoring Moscow's relations with the West are ephemeral. The publication also notes that Russia's main allies in the Middle East, Iran and Syria, have been significantly weakened, in addition to losing traditional friends in the Caucasus and Central Asia. In addition, journalists have noticed Trump has become disillusioned with Putin and promised to facilitate Ukraine. In return, Russian propagandists bombarded with criticism of not only the American president, but also his wife, Melania Trump. And Russian banks are on the verge of decline because of dictator Putin's war against Ukraine, and every third ruble spent by Moscow goes to military needs. The Telegraph reports that at least 3 Russian banks are trying to get help from Moscow as borrowers want to repay loans in the war-hit economy. Meanwhile, officials have ordered financial institutions to avoid disclosing the full extent of bad loans and instead restructure their accounts to show a better picture. However, such tactics, according to the media, are ineffective, which is why the banks need support from Moscow. Russia will lose tens of billions of dollars due to the new oil price ceiling. This was stated by Ukrainian Presidential Commissioner for Sanctions Policy, Vladislav Vlasyuk. According to him, the Kremlin will lose $10–20 on each barrel. At the same time, Russian oil is already sold at a significant discount. Overall, Russia will suffer significant losses as most of the tankers of the Shadow Fleet are already under sanctions, and legal carriers may refuse Russian oil. Apples from North Korea have started to appear on the shelves of Russian supermarkets. This is reported by the Financial Times. According to observers, the North Koreans are planning to actively seize the markets of the Russian Federation. Manufacturers of products and even musical instruments have registered trademarks in Russia. Also, North Korean fishing boats have entered the waters off the Far East coast. In addition, the Russian Federation is building a highway bridge across the Tyumen River at a cost of $100 million. Let me remind you that Moscow and Pyongyang signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement in June last year.
North Korean producers of jam, sausages, beer and even accordions are actively registering their trademarks in Russia. Moreover, according to the Financial Times, DPRK apples have already started appearing on the shelves of Russian supermarkets. Until recently, Pyongyang traded almost exclusively with China, but now North Korea has a chance to enter the similarly isolated Russian market. However, experts assess these prospects rather cautiously.
Developing trade is likely to bring Russia limited financial benefits. Most of the goods North Korea exports are of little interest to Russian importers. Andrei Lankov, North Korea expert at Kookmin University in Seoul, in a commentary for the Financial Times.
Pyongyang and Moscow are rapidly strengthening ties in a variety of areas. Over the past year, North Korean university rectors visited Vladivostok, where they held meetings with their Russian counterparts as part of the joint forum. North Korean athletes have participated in competitions on Russian territory, and Russian theaters have performed in Pyongyang. The Kremlin is not interested in such initiatives, but it is vital to appease Kim Jong-un so that he is willing to continue selling Moscow weapons to continue the war against Ukraine.
From the point of view of geopolitics, this is not even a slap in the face, it is simply a total humiliation. And many people understand this, including the partners of the Russian Federation. Russia depends on North Korea in the context of continuing the war. Of course, North Korea will take advantage of this and impose its vision and get maximum bonuses for itself, and Russia will ask for North Korea to continue this support.
According to the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, Pyongyang has already earned more than $20 billion from arms sales to Moscow, and in order to preserve these supposedly friendly relations, the Kremlin is ready to spend on symbolic gestures. Thus, according to the Financial Times, Russia has begun construction of a 100 million road bridge over the Tumanная River, and is also developing a project to resume railroad communication between Moscow and Pyongyang, which is about 10,000 kilometers long. These initiatives could result in large-scale financial injections into the North Korean economy. It would seem that this is a chance to improve the living conditions of the local population, but analysts are sure that dictator Kim Jong-un is unlikely to allow this.
While some of this money will be spent on improving the living conditions of its own people, in reality, most of it is likely to be squandered on prestige projects such as skyscrapers in Pyongyang and other privileges for the elite. Peter Ward, research fellow at the Sejong Institute think tank, in a commentary for the Financial Times.
As of early July 2025, there was only one direct flight between North Korea and Russia, a flight from Pyongyang to Vladivostok, and that was only once every 2 weeks. But now, as part of deepening cooperation between the authoritarian regimes, Russian low-cost carrier Nordwind is launching a direct road between Moscow and Pyongyang. The first flight is on July 27th, and the return flight is on the 29th. Who and why will fly to the isolated country is still a big question. Nevertheless, so-called tourism in the DPRK is in full swing. A group of 13 Russians went on vacation to Wonsan-Kalma. They traveled by train, and it was apparently not difficult for the North Koreans to surprise them.
It was just unbelievable. The room was new, very comfortable, air-conditioned. Unnamed Russian tourist from a publication by Russian propaganda media.
While Russia continues to humiliate itself and become more and more dependent on North Korea, Pyongyang is trying to use such ostentatious events as an opportunity to prove that Kim Jong-un is not isolated at all. At the same time, North Korea continues to earn tens of billions of dollars from Moscow through arms sales. According to South Korean intelligence, Kim Jong-un has already transferred 28,000 containers of arms and ammunition to Russia. Russia has received about 12 million artillery shells of 152mm caliber, but even this is not enough for the Kremlin.
They really do not have enough resources, exactly military resources, to wage a war of the intensity they started in 2022 against Ukraine. This is an absolutely paradoxical situation. That is, the superpower, which invested billions of dollars, not even rubles, in defense, in increasing and strengthening the army, which had colossal stocks of various types of weapons after the collapse of the Soviet Union, in the fourth year of the war, receives 40% of shells from North Korea.
I would like to remind you that in addition to arms supplies, Moscow managed to bargain 12,000 North Koreans from Pyongyang for the war against Ukraine. This is the figure given by the Ukrainian intelligence service. The South Korean one estimates the DPRK's losses from January to March 2025 at almost 4,700 people. But according to CNN, Kim Jong-un is ready to go even further. In the near future, he may send a new wave of soldiers to Russia, from 25 to 30,000 troops. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, Pavlo Shtermach, UATV News.
And let's finish with some news of success. Ukraine's champion Oleksandr Usyk has defended his title in the fight against a British opponent, Daniel Dubois. Oleksandr Usyk, Ukrainian born in Crimea, defeated his counterpart with a knockout in the middle of the fight, and the whole world has seen that their champion is from Crimea, Ukraine. This fight and this win means a lot for all defenders of Ukraine. Usyk devoted his victory to them, by the way.
I want to dedicate this victory to people around the world. I want to thank the whole of Ukraine, all the guys who are defending our country. I have received many messages from various units defending Ukraine. You are incredible. Glory to Ukraine. Oleksandr Usyk, world boxing champion, after the victorious fight.
That was it for today. My name is Henry Keane, and we are News Pulse at UATV. We thank you so very much for your time and attention. We appreciate it. Thank you. Please join our fight for freedom and sovereignty by subscribing and commenting. Your voice helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. Hope to see you soon. Stay tuned. Goodbye.